Welcome to the Software Process and Measurement Cast number 761. I'm Tom Cagley, your host. Today, we continue our exploration of critical thinking. In this installment, we examine logical fallacies. The logic in logical fallacies is incorrect. That's why they're called fallacies. Whether by design or misinterpretation, you need to be prepared. This week, Jeremy Berriault brings a discussion of QA audits in Agile to the QA Corner. Are QA audits a logical fallacy? Critical thinking, logical fallacies. Persuasion is one of the most common activities in business, whether conversing with a friend over a virtual lunch or teaching a class. Everyone participates either as a convincor or a convinced. Parsing all of the ideas and arguments that support those conversations requires critical thinking. Paul Gibbons, author of Change Myths, also a recent guest on the SPaMCAST, suggests that logic is a tool in critical thinking. Logic helps to weigh the sometimes conflicting inputs of authority, intuition, and to research evidence. Secondly, logic helps the critical thinker reason between generalizations and specifics, and whether knowledge can be transferred from one domain to another. Humans are not creatures of pure logic, which can lead to problems. We struggle to be logically consistent. One of the areas of inconsistency is logical fallacies. These logic problems are arguments that can be disproven by reasoning. The logic in logical fallacies is incorrect, whether by design or misinterpretation. Logical fallacies are not arguments that can be overturned by fact or through differences in opinions and experience. I ran across a tweet this morning that is useful as an exercise in critical thinking and building awareness of logical fallacies. This is a parody, by the way. Agile doesn't have any documentation, which means anyone joining the team will be lost. As a result, Agile teams need to be stable. If we broke that up into three pieces, Agile doesn't have any documentation, part A, which means anybody joining the team will be lost, part B. As a result, Agile teams need to be stable, part C. We can write that as a logical formula. If A, then B, therefore C. Again, the tweet was a parody, and both fact and subjective arguments would cause the reader to reject it. It's part of the parody of it. However, for the sake of using the tweet to highlight logic problems, let's take it apart. If we accept A is true, we need to evaluate the second portion of the tweet. B, is B not true? Is it sometimes true or never true? My experience gained through working with many teams is that without documentation, sometimes people can have problems, but not always. Therefore, A does not always cause B to be true, which then does not necessarily lead to C. The statement falls apart logically. This type of logical fallacy is called causal fallacy. There are lots of types of logical fallacies. I was listening to someone teaching a Scrum class. At one point, they put up a slide that indicated that 71% of organizations use Agile methods, and that 75% of Agile work is done by Scrum. The teacher was invoking the bandwagon fallacy to push the ideas in the class. They were suggesting that everyone is doing Scrum, therefore so should everyone else in the class. Since every team and organization faces different forces, the idea that one approach to work works for everyone is logically false. The bandwagon effect sweeps up people and blinds them from applying critical thinking. Another common fallacy is ad hominem, and this is unfortunately really prevalent. This occurs when someone attacks a person or trait of that person instead of the idea itself. At a conference I attended recently, I overheard a great example of ad hominem while eating lunch and listening to others chat. Person 1. I work in a PMO and act as both a Scrum Master and project manager on the same projects. Problematic in its own right. Person 2. You can't be Agile. You work in a PMO. The response was an attack on the person rather than a discussion of the approach to staffing the organization person 1 works for. There are numerous logical fallacies. Learning to recognize at least the most common is important to becoming a better critical thinker. Next, we'll explore more of the attributes of a critical thinker. Jeremy Berriault, welcome to the Software Process and Management Cast.
It is always a pleasure.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Jeremy, something weird's happening in July. What's going on in July?
In July, that's right, Agile 2023.
Okay. Why is that so important?
Well, because I'll be having a speaking session on it on the second day, I believe, Tuesday at 10:30.
Wicked. What are you going to talk about?
I am going to be talking about the title is Agile Maturity. Is it an Agile anti-pattern?
I don't think so. I think maturity is more important than evolution.
But I didn't say evolution yet. You jumped ahead.
I know, because I know where this is going. We'll postpone some of this discussion until perhaps another time. Today, I want rip a Band-Aid off.
Oh boy.
A nice fresh one.
Okay.
QA audits. So since this is the QA corner, tell me about QA audits in an agile world.
It's interesting. Like right now, you said ripping a Band-Aid off because I'm just going through it, is in this one organization, they do their audits and they try to put a square peg in a round hole. So the way they used to do it from a traditional standpoint, where you have your test results, your test cases, you have your traceability, you have your flow, everything documented. They are trying to pin it within with an agile team that I'm working with now. And they flagged the team on a couple things which they didn't understand. One of the main things was that there was no test results for each test run that they did. Although it was the same test result from the first run, which they did have a result. And they just couldn't wrap their heads around as to why you wouldn't take extra screenshots or files or whatever and put it into Jira on the test case.
Why you're running the same test multiple times?
Well, it's more once they create the test and do it and they run it, then it gets automated. And then they just run the automation over and over again because it's a continuous development, continuous deployment environment.
I assume that's where you were going. And that's,
Yeah.
I'm sort of setting you up perhaps.
Yeah. Whoa.
So test results on an automated CI/CD chain that you're running, and you're running automated tests. Heck, you might run tests multiple times a day since you might be checking in multiple times a day and building. You have to track the test results every time if they pass?
Well, because they want the successful proof of the test being run and getting the actual result. Now, I have been in one group where they did not have that stringent of a follow-up to make sure that there's results there. And it did come back and bite them because there was an individual that was just passing the test cases without actually running them. And then the issue...
This is an automated test. How can that be possible?
Well, again, this is a previous group. This is a previous group that I worked with. And the test was not automated because their automation team was not fast enough to automate as soon as they could. And these were new functional test cases that the way things were run was the automation happened after the sprint and mostly after deployment because they were so far behind. And that's a whole other story we can get into in another topic.
In other words, Tom, stop laughing.
Yeah, Tom, stop laughing. We're done. See, now we got a topic for a future discussion. But yeah, so from this, because it's a financial institution that I'm working with and they deal with financial transactions, obviously there's SOX audits, a bunch of other different acronym audits that have to go on, and they have to show the proof of results. So with them and the automation, it's only one set of results. And they just couldn't understand why, well, if you ran these test cases 10 times, why don't you have 10 results? It's like, well, because it's the same result. And after some discussions, we figured, like, they kind of clued in as like, well, one, it's one result. It's the same result. Two, we've proven that it's the same result. And three, it's actually saving disk space. When, mind you, disk space doesn't cost that much, but it doesn't clog up the database with results that are just all duplicates. The only difference is they would have a different timestamp on them.
Realistically, those results, every time you ran something, every time you run an automated test, you could end up with different results because, very frankly, they're there to catch the fact that, somebody could have messed something up. What would have happened if you run it and you didn't, one of these automated tests didn't pass?
Well, and it's just, you should have a flow and a process to go through to ensure that one, validated if it was a false positive, could have been an environment issue, kind of do that root cause into it to see what was the issue. And if it did turn out to be a full on, like, either environment and they were able to fix it, or if it was a code bug, then just rerun it and you get the results you want. Awesome. And then those are the results you use because you have the fix, you have the version control, you're able to see what you were able to follow the flow as to what happened and how it got fixed and when. So
I think part of what I'm here, well, there are a number of things that jump to mind as we go through this. Arguably, right, if an automated test is running and it flags anything, I've worked in organizations where that would flag the build broken and would just break the build, and you'd know it, and somebody would then have to go fix it before anything else could happen. I think there's a couple of other potential issues given that testing happens in the process that you're describing sort of asynchronously. So development happens and then they throw it over the wall, and testing happens, and therefore it's separate and distinct. That's pretty 1990s anyway. But yeah, I like the 1990s. I still listen to some of that music on the golden oldies station. It certainly isn't the top station on XP.
No.
XM radio. Regardless. So many of the listeners may have never run across a QA audit before. What is a QA audit, and what's the value of a QA audit?
So most of the places where I've worked with and gone and helped out with some QA audits, it's more looking at the process and the flow. Is it consistent? Do they have guidelines in place to ensure that you are validating what you say you're going to validate? Do you have the right, do you have test cases? Do you have test cases? You should have test cases. Do you have them linked up somehow? Are you able to find some sort of traceability throughout and ensure that you've tested what you said you were going to test. There's some where like you have to, like, do you have a test plan? In an agile environment, a test plan, I've always used kind of a high level test plan just to remain consistent, to give guidelines. Like, this is, and it's not just specific to the QA team, it's specific to the team as a whole, as how they will treat the quality within the work that they're going to do.
Death to quality. We don't need quality.
No, who needs quality?
Right. We can fix it after I'm sorry. Of course we need quality. Keep going.
Yeah. There are some organizations that do work with that. It's like, yeah, we'll fix it when someone complains. But
I'm crying.
Yeah.
Out loud.
Yep. But it's more like before. So in the 90s and early 2000s, when I went through QA type audits, it was really, they were really strict in that. Are you writing your test cases in this particular format? Do you have the requirement number? Do you have the requirement number listed within the
directional traceability?
Yeah. Do you have all that? Like, it was really strict. Now, in kind of a lot of change, which is good in that, okay, you have test cases, great. Do you have them linked up to user stories, even to requirements, depending on what tool you use? Do you have that link? So like a bi-directional, but more online. You don't have to give a spreadsheet with like X's and all that fun business. Do you have your test results? Good. Everything passed. In your test plan, you say that everyone does a review, like either informal or formal, of the results, to all kind of not like agree that that's the end result. Does everyone agree with that? Yep. Did you do it? Yeah. So I think now those audits I'm trying to push to be focused more from like, you got your guidelines. Are you following the guidelines? Is everyone getting the work done? Not to be too stringent, because everyone writes test cases different. Everyone does everything different regardless. And it's the principles of using guidelines. That's where I think, as long as you're still within the guidelines, then you're good.
So QA audits, good thing. It'd be interesting to see how you would do a true QA audit if you were doing development and testing all in a single sprint on a single team.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see why that should be a problem, but it would compact it. Matter of fact, it probably make it easier, but it would compact the scenario.
Well, yeah, because remember, with a team, you should have your team charter that kind of gives the rules of how the team's going to work together to ensure quality. So that plus a high level test plan, those are the teams. That's the team's guidelines on how we're going to push forward. So you're right. It should be easier for someone to come in and, like, if you're using Jira as a tool, if an auditor comes in saying, "Hey, we want to do an audit," awesome. Here's the Jira link. Go nuts. Here's where our stories are. Here's our sprints. Go nuts. Here's our team charter. Here's where our plans are. Go nuts. Let us know if something goes wrong.
Donuts, you said?
Donuts.
Donuts, yeah. Yeah, donuts. Tim Hortons.
Krispy Kreme.
Tim Hortons, man. You can go Krispy Kreme, man. I'll go Tim Hortons.
Okay.
All right. So, excellent. Jeremy, how would people continue the conversation about Agile, QA audits in an Agile world? And I understand you live in a low trust environment, and those kind of things make sense. Let's face it. Anytime that you throw in things like SOX and this and that and all these kind of audits, we're describing a low trust scenario. And I guess that's what's required, because unfortunately humans have not earned the trust that would buy them out of that. Matter of fact, why do we have SOX? Because people messed up a crowbar pretty easily. So how would they continue that conversation with you?
They can find me on LinkedIn doing a search for Jeremy Berriault in Toronto. And you can find me at on my webpage, berriaultassociates.com.
Super. You're not going to say, like Evan Laybourne did the other day, that he's the only Evan Laybourne in the world, and if you find Evan Laybourne, you've got him. You've gone down the path in the past of saying, hey, if you find this Jeremy Berriault in Toronto or the Toronto area, that's me. There ain't no others. So,
well, there is another Jeremy Berriault, and I'm related to him, but he's about 15 years younger than me. So
so he's like 13 now.
Yeah. Well, yes. Okay. That is exactly it.
And now, is he in the Toronto area?
I don't know.
How do you're related to him and you don't know where this person is?
Like
that has the same name?
That has the same name. Distant cousin. A very distant cousin.
Are you sure you're not a clone?
I am. Well, no, I can't confirm or deny that.
Jeremy, it is always a pleasure to have a conversation on the QA Corner with you. In Reread Saturday news, the Reread Saturday has been a feature of the Software Process and Measurement blog since 2013. 7 Habits of Highly Effective People was the first book. This week, we are still in the process of choosing the next book or books. We chose 3 last time. Therefore, we have a bit of an interlude today. I need your input to make the final cut. Please go to the poll in the show notes, www.tcagley.wordpress.com. In the interim, catch up on the reread of Team Topologies. There's a link in the show notes to all 11 of the entries in the Team Topologies reread. In the next Software Process and Measurement cast, that'll be 762, we will share a panel discussing the impact of AI on the future of project management. A boon or bane? Let the conversation begin.